Hello friends, welcome to the EduSat Network. Today we are going to discuss some theories of structuralism. For this discussion we have with us in the studio Dr. Anand Prakash. He has taught English literature in Delhi University for more than 4 decades from 1965 to his retirement in 2007, and his publications include Wuthering Heights and Interpretation and Marxist Literary Theory. He has also published the edited volume Our Story and a full-length study of Mukti Bodh titled Mukti Bodh in Our Time. So, we are of course very privileged to have Sir here with us today, and let us welcome him. Welcome Sir, thank you for coming, and with this I would like to request him to begin today's lecture.
Thanks Urvashi and viewers. You have already heard the first part of the discussion that happened yesterday, and I continue from the thread from where I left. For instance, I said at the end of the discussion yesterday that structuralism makes us look at the text at 3 levels, and those 3 levels are that a text is a world of its own. It can be discussed within itself. It affords meaning from within itself, and that one doesn't have to refer to any extraneous, any outside element, which means that itself would denote the language, the word pattern, the sequence of sentences, the sequence of chapters, all these things, that the work will be taken just as a text, as a linguistic representation, and even if one doesn't take any help from anywhere else regarding the text, and one starts grappling with the text per se as such, then something will be made out of this by the listener, by the reader, because the text is supposed to be generally in the printed form. When one doesn't refer to anything else and the text still affords some meaning, it shows that there are certain inherent elements in it, and that is one level. It's a primary level, but then this is the starting point of making sense of the text. The second level that I talked about yesterday was that it straight away helps us connect with other things of the same kind. For instance, you are reading a novel, and it's a new novel, and you want to read it by itself, as I said at the first level, but then immediately after this you start thinking of other novels written around the same time, written earlier, which means that you will be, or I will be, both of us will be comparing the text with texts of the same kind elsewhere, and that there is a world constituted by these texts, novels. You have books written on the theory of the novel, the interpretation of the novel, realism in the novel, all these books, aspects of the novel. These books are there. So these books refer to the entire tradition of writing novels. So the text then starts relating to these other novels, and in the light of what one understands from other novels, one can make sense of the present text also. The third level is still more wide, and that level is not merely confined to one kind of genre, but to literary writing in general, and in fact the atmosphere of culture around the activity of writing literature. So what I said at one point of time in the series of lectures referred to the cultural superstructure. So that cultural superstructure, that cultural milieu, that cultural world that exists in every society has some aspect of it connected with the text. So one can say that one starts after some time placing the text in the cultural world, the cultural world of the writer, the cultural world of the reader, and in general that is, and then a different set of meanings starts emerging from the reading of the text. So these are the 3 levels, and you would have seen that the discussion is confined only to writing in general, whether it's words, whether it's the other novels, or whether it is the cultural world. So one doesn't generally go outside the domain of the text, and the text is supposed to be placed at the center. So these levels then are levels, which in a way alienate literature from the concerns of the author, the concerns of the age when the book was written, the message of the writing, etc., and that the entire venture is actually text-centered. So this is what I call structuralism, that there are structures in the language, there are structures in the language of other texts, which relate, which go parallel to the one that one is studying, and the structures that operate at the level of ideas also in the cultural field. So all over, it's a study of the structures in literature, and that is what our topic is for the day. So from here we move to the next point, which is the new point today, and that since we are talking about the text and about structure, therefore certain techniques would be required to understand a literary text, and these texts then start offering a peculiar kind of meaning and knowledge to the reader, and these techniques have to be learned specifically by the reader, by the viewer, and without learning the techniques, one can't really understand the meaning and message, if at all there is, of the text. What does it mean? It means that one has to be an expert reader, one has to be a trained reader, and that one should have the skills to understand literature, to decipher the intent of the writing, and that if the person is not trained and skilled, then of course literature will go over the head of most people. So please keep in mind the other idea that literature is meant for the larger masses. It is for the common reader, as Virginia Woolf in the early 20th century talked about at length. So common reader is kept out of the purview, because common reader doesn't get that kind of training to understand literature, and therefore that is kept out. But you should keep it in the background, and let's try to understand what structuralism in this form means to us. So I first take the word metaphor to understand the text. So which are the metaphors? Metaphors actually are the extended similes. Similes, that you compare one thing with another, and there is no connection between one thing and the other one, but then the author draws your attention to something else. So in a way, the author, the critic, is taking you away from, with the help of metaphor, is taking you away from the text to another area, and then the certain similarities are pointed out, and these similarities then help us get back to the text. So metaphor is an unknown area, an unrelated area at the obvious sense, but then there must be some relationship because of which one starts understanding. If one says that the night was, there was darkness at a very early part, in the evening, and this darkness was pitch dark. It was darkness of the densest of the clear kind, and that in this darkness one could think of the crow. So as black as a crow, suppose one says this, and then crow doesn't have any relation with darkness in the sense that darkness of the night and crow are two different things. But then this metaphor takes the person away from the text, and then the reader gets back to it. So this kind of a technique where your attention is drawn away from the text, and then you are brought back to the text in a new way. That is what the purpose of the metaphor is, and one should try to identify metaphors and see what kind of a light they shed on the text itself. So a trained reader can find out where the metaphor is used, what the metaphor is, what is the world of the metaphor, what is the world of the text in the light of the metaphor, and so on and so forth. Then there is a thing called metonymy. Now metonymy is not exactly going away from the text. It is only that the words which are there in the text, they have a kind of association with other words. So those other words are brought in. If there is a class, then there can be a word called group. There can be a group called section. There can be a subsection. There can be a segment. All these words are kind of synonyms of the one word that is used in the text. So these words are brought in, and these words help the reader understand as to what exactly is being said, because a category of ideas is brought in. This is called metonymy. Metonymy is some kind of a reference which is shared by the word in the text. So that's a metonymy. So the metaphor is totally unrelated, but metonymy is partly related. And you can then, after you have found metonymies in the text, then you can compare, metaphors also with the metonymies, and then maybe when you start discussing literature from the point of view of the words which are ingrained in the text, then you will have newer insights into the work that is being discussed. Now these techniques, take us to the word formalism. Formalism, form, we understand the word form as the opposite of content, and till the 19th century, writers did not exactly focus upon the component of form in literature. There will be a free kind of movement from one form to another. In the 20th century, of course, form is being attacked also by certain writers. That's a different story. But then there are certain thinkers and certain theoreticians in literary writing who say that literature itself is form. Literature is not anything else. Literature is not content, because content is there in the social life only. And social life is shared by all branches of knowledge. Social life is there in science, social knowledge is there, social life is there in sociology, in history, in economics, in all areas of knowledge. Therefore, one should keep away from the idea of social life when one talks of literature. Literature is distinguished from other branches of knowledge by the form it has. So this is the basic principle of formalism. And already when one was talking of the text, then one was talking of form, because the form has only the text to support itself. And if you focus upon the text, then in a way you are discussing the form. And Russian formalism emerged in the early part of the 20th century, and this formalism was driven by the urge of formalism was driven by the existing writing in the early 20th century, particularly in Soviet Russia. And Soviet Russia had come into being as a republic, as a socialist republic in 1917, and writers were as much activists as the politicians, as the leaders of society. Therefore, writers also had it on their shoulders to play a role, and writing was then geared towards changing the consciousness of society and things like that. This straight away connected with the tradition of realism in the 19th century, where writers consciously wrote in order to educate the masses. Now, against that background, these thinkers of the early 20th century, they started saying that is not literature. And in fact, any kind of ideology, any kind of politics, any kind of social reality is extraneous to, is outside literature, and let's discuss literature and literature alone. So, of course, they would not be looked at kindly by the people who were in power at that time in Russia. So, therefore, they went underground and they started, running, study circles, and they would discuss literature as literature and nothing else. So, this Russian formalism emerged from this particular reaction to the apparent message that was supposed to be carried by the writing of the time. So keep this Russian formalism in mind, and I say here that the context is post-revolutionary period, so it would be 1920s or 1930s when Russian formalists would be holding discussions privately and writing books and distributing pamphlets and telling the other stream of writers that writing of that kind is very superficial, and the true writing is that which is truly literary and which bothers about things like metaphor and metonymy. So, in a way, a wedge is driven between the writing that is supposed to be inherently literary and that writing which is supposed to be playing a social role. So, keep this in mind, and I pick up from the many formalists from Russia only two in order to discuss something about formalism, which is a kind of structuralism, because form only discusses structures. One is Victor Shklovsky, and the other is Bakhtin. These two are the they are the kind of rage that that the 20th century has seen. And Victor Shklovsky particularly talked about techniques of writing and techniques of reading and techniques of identifying the specifics of. I'll come to this a little later, but let's have another set of philosophers and thinkers belonging to the structuralist method. And there is a Prague school in the 20th century, and there is Roman Jacobson, there is Jan Mukorowski, there is C.S. Peirce, there is A.J. Greimas, there is Umberto Eco, Roland Barthes, Todorov, Claude Levi-Strauss. All these people refer to techniques. They bring in the idea of structures, and those structures have to do something with language, and it is only through language and the playfulness that is associated with language, that the writer would be grappling with the idea that is supposed to be expressed through a work of art. So these were all, and it's very fascinating, that so many important scholars and writers in the 20th century, they are struggling to evolve theories about literature, about how to read literature, about how to make sense of literature, about how to find structures and see the role that they play in the writing. So I'll be picking up just a few, one or two of these people in the 20th century. They are structuralists, and they are forwarding. They are projecting these arguments in their writing. So when we talk of Victor Shklovsky, he has talked of habituation, by which he means the tendency to accept things as usual and ordinary since they occur frequently. Now it's quite simple to express that we as we live an ordinary kind of life, we realize that we become habitual to a certain situation. For instance, a teacher in the class every day takes the class, and then he becomes habitual. He or she becomes habitual to the atmosphere in the class. So initially the teacher will take note of the chairs and tables and the blackboard and other things, the fan, whether it's working or not, and of course it's always working so far as the classroom is concerned. But after a repetition of 10 or 15 times, the teacher will stop noticing these things. The teacher will straight away come to the class and start talking to the students, and even the his hand will automatically work to find the chalk, and he will not look for it because he knows that there is a particular point at the table where the chalk is placed. So which means that the writer gets accustomed to a particular kind of atmosphere and starts taking things for granted. This is called habituation, and this kills all our interest in life. If we are habituated to the home or to the classroom, then we stop taking any interest in the classroom or in the home. So what is the writer's job in such a situation? Should he also assume, like the teacher, like the family man, like the citizen, etc., that the whole thing is given and you have seen it, you have understood it, and now you don't bother to even think about it? So life loses, the person loses interest in life. Now, what is literature's job here? So the formalists say that the literature's the job of literature in such a situation is to break this habit, and breaking of this habit is in the quotation is called defamiliarization. That you are familiar with the things and you take them for granted, and very soon you lose interest in things. You think that, well, these are given and why should I bother about it? Interestingly, there are people who are struck by certain phrases that Shakespeare uses. Shakespeare is known for using phrases in a very dramatic fashion, and there are many quotable lines in Shakespeare, but these lines have been quoted so many times that somebody starts quoting it and somebody else says, yes, yes, I know, which means that Shakespeare has become that way meaningless, because all of us know this. This is also true of Urdu poetry, which is very popular, that Ghalib, for instance, can be quoted, and as soon as you start quoting Ghalib, somebody says, yes, I know, which means that this familiarity kills literature, and therefore the job of writer is to defamiliarize, is to attack familiarity, is to not use those quotations, is not to use those phrases which have already become cliche. So how to break the cliches in writing? This is one of the tasks of writing, and Victor Slowsky particularly talked about this, that the writer in such a case starts using defamiliarization. To quote him again, Victor Slowsky has talked of habituation, by which he means the tendency to accept things as usual and ordinary since they occur frequently. In the process of repetition, they become automatic. Art is to restore to those things their originality. The means through which this may happen is the technique of what he called familiarization. In his essay, Art as Technique, and imagine the essay's title is a very a strange kind of a title. Art is supposed to be something to do with life. Art is supposed to be something to do with beauty. So most of the books would say, well, the art and aesthetics, art and beauty, art and life, art and society. But no, Slowsky says that the title of his book will be Art as Technique. And here we see a reference to Tolstoy, who used, according to Slowsky, such a technique. Now let's see what Slowsky said about Tolstoy. He said, Tolstoy makes the familiar seem strange by not naming the familiar object. If you don't name an object, you start talking about it, you have a chair and you don't say it's a chair, you say, well, there is something in the room which makes us feel comfortable, and we bend and we place ourselves in it, and then our knees have a kind of sense of ease, and that ease refreshes us. And after some time, the reader will start thinking, is he talking about the chair? And then of course the person is talking about the chair, but then in the meantime the reader's interest has been evoked. So this is what defamiliarization is. So Tolstoy makes the familiar seem strange by not naming the familiar object. He describes an object as if he were seeing it for the first time, an event as if it were happening for the first time. In describing something, he avoids the accepted names of its parts and instead names corresponding parts of other objects. So maybe when you talk about the chair, you start talking about the cot. You start talking about a certain part of the floor where you'll relax, and all those things. So that way the focus will not be on the cliche of sitting in the chair and reading, but on the freshness of an unknown thing which will compel the reader to think afresh about it. So this is called familiarization, defamiliarization, and let's see how Tolstoy uses this. I'll just take a quotation from Tolstoy slightly later. Tolstoy uses this technique of defamiliarization constantly. The narrator of Holstomer, for example, there is a short story. The narrator is a horse. Now all of us know that horses can't talk, but then Tolstoy's narrator in the short story is a horse, and it is the horse's point of view rather than a person's that makes the content of the story seem unfamiliar. What the point is, what horse is talking about? Horse is talking about the human situation. So you have another angle, in the fictional piece, where an observer is not a human being but a horse, and will horse observe all those things which we observe, and then we are really fascinated reading such a thing, and then the end result is, as Slowsky would say, defamiliarization. So he says that here is how the horse regards the institution of private property. That's a fine question to be put to a horse. What do you think of the private property? And horse will try to find out whether And there of course a joke also behind this, somewhere hidden in the use of the horse as a narrator, that horse has a sense, and in common parlance we say horse sense. So see the sense of the horse at play in this particular piece that Tolstoy has written. I here is horse. I understand well what they said about whipping and Christianity. It's not a joke, because the horse has been whipped again and again, and Christianity also talks about punishing people. So far as horse is concerned, he understands well what they said about whipping and Christianity. But then I was absolutely in the dark. What's the meaning of his own, his colt? Well, you can. I know that this book is mine, and I know that the other book is of somebody else. But what is this? So how will horse explain his own or his colt? From these phrases I saw, says the horse, that people thought there was some sort of connection between me and the stable. That's what the people think, not the horse. At the time I simply could not understand the connection between the horse and the stable. Only much later, when they separated me from the other horses, did I begin to understand. So horse is beginning to understand the system, the structure in a given situation. And then the situation is that in society there is private property. So when you move around as a person, then you say, this is my house. But can the horse say the same thing, that this is my house? Well, the human beings can tell the horse that this is your place, therefore this is your house. But the horse will take time and to understand as to how the stable is his. Maybe the stable also is of the owner, because the horse is of the owner. But then horse does not make sense of this kind of a thing. But then the operative part here, the more effective part here, I begin to understand. And that's what in fact that's what the reader also might think. Oh, now I understand what the author is saying. So the author is talking very strangely about a very easily perceptible phenomenon. And when he makes the thing, he or she makes the thing strange, then only we start thinking in a new way, and we enrich our understanding. So the horse begins to understand, and of course the reader also is turned into some kind of an observer who identifies himself or herself with the horse, and therefore the reader also starts understanding. I move to the next part of the quotation. Only much later, when they separated me from the other horses, did I begin to understand. So see Tolstoy's technique. The word begin to understand is occurring the second time, which means that the process has begun and the process is continuing. But even then I simply could not see what it meant when they called me man's property. Now I know what property is, you know what property is, but how does a horse know what property is? So once again Tolstoy is drawing the attention of the reader to the concept of property, which is a structure in society. Society is run by the concept of property. Society is divided along lines which say that some people have property and some others don't have property. So there is a division in society, and this is structured in society. In structuralism we are discussing structures. So but how does horse understand that there is a man's property? The word my horse referred to me, a living horse, and seemed as strange to me as the word my land, my air, my water. So Tolstoy is being understood this way, that he is making the reader understand whether somebody can say my water. My water means my sea, my ocean, or my air. So nothing like mine here, because this is something that is to be shared by all of us together, and this is meant for consumption for all of us. So in a way, indirectly this is the meaning, and this meaning is being created by the critic while reading Tolstoy in this fashion, by seeing that Tolstoy is using a technique of defamiliarization, because of which we understand the story better. And in fact, what have we understood from this story with the help of structuralism? That in the Russian society at the time Tolstoy is writing, there is a concept of property, and that property is dividing the society into two parts, the part which can be called of the haves and the other part which can be called of the have-nots, and that human beings have created this property themselves. Animals have not created property. Animals are equal participants, on this planet in the general life of things. But then only human beings understand, and human beings create and construct these divisions, and other forms of life on the planet, they don't understand these things. So in a way we have kept out the other forms of life also from the purview. We could in this regard, and well, this is how, if you understand literature this way, that you are only focusing upon the words, you are only focusing upon defamiliarization, about strangeness of a description, and then you start putting questions to yourself, because the horse is putting questions to himself, and we place ourselves in the position of the horse. Then only you start seeing some of the hidden meanings of a text, and if you understand the function of the economic structure called property in society, then that structure is brought out by the perception and by the observation of the horse, or the narrator who has been given the shape of the horse. So this is one way of understanding literature, and this requires a method, this requires a technique, this requires a skill, and with that you can always analyze and comment on literary work or a text this way. Now, of course, Shklovsky has talked about the theory in the early part of the 20th century, but writers, instinctively have been using such techniques since times immemorial. For instance, I refer in the next point to Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Now, the whole thing is a make-believe, and the big people in Gulliver's Travels, they don't understand how small people can also live along at the same time, or people who are away from them. So the entire parable of Gulliver's Travels is a case of defamiliarization. You never relate to the people, the creatures and others in the Gulliver's Travels, and yet soon you start understanding, you begin understanding, to use the word here, that Gulliver's Travels is a book about the 18th century situation in England and in other parts of the world. That it's a world where there is a lot of injustice. So that point is conveyed through the use of certain structures and techniques by the author, and those techniques also help the reader to go into the nature of things. Would you like to respond to this and new kind of approach to literature, Urvashi?
Sir, definitely. Also, I'd like to say that this whole idea of putting things in the mouth of a horse is very interesting, and of course then you have taken the example of Swift, and how in his Gulliver's Travels he also has these horse-like creatures, and they have things to say and comments on the society which the writer cannot directly say, but it is conveyed through another character and the technique of defamiliarization.
And when I was having a look at these quotations, then I was also reminded of certain short stories of Premchand, the Hindi writer of the early 20th century, and he has written certain remarkable short stories about animals. There is a famous story by him called Do Bailon Ki Kahani, where these two oxen, they talk to each other. They have a name also. One ox is called Hira and the other is called Moti, and they are talking about the owner. They are talking about the neighborhood, and in a way, when the neighborhood is being looked at from the point of view of the oxen, then a different kind of a world emerges, and it is that world that we are supposed to deal with. Generally, we take it for granted, but when we look at it from an animal's angle, then we realize how cruel we are. Because the fodder is not given to an animal unless it is mine, unless it is yours, and if you don't have the money, then the animal will starve. What kind of world is this? And these animals, they ask this question from themselves. There is another story by Premchand which is very famous, where a kind of panchayat is happening. It's called in English translation Holy Panchayat, Panch Parmeshwar, and in that story there is a quarrel between two friends, and that is being sorted out by the panchayat, and there is another panchayat that the birds are holding next to that place, and they are discussing among themselves, says Premchand, what kind of silly fools these are, that they are discussing the ordinary things in such a manner. We could have sorted it out quite easily. So that way, when the bird's point of view is introduced in the story, Holy Panchayat, then a new level of understanding and realization occurs. So I thought that such kind of defamiliarization actually is used by writers all the time. This can be at the level of creativity, this can be at the level of experimentation, and through creativity and experimentation, which are of course always used as techniques here, then we are making the reader aware of those particular nuances which remain hidden in society, but then which can be brought out with the help of certain techniques that the writers use. So this is about the Shklovsky, and so far as Bakhtin is concerned, I didn't have a quotation from him, but I thought I should just talk about this. Bakhtin slightly disagreed with the principle that language alone would be a proper indicator of the conveying of knowledge. But then he was extending the scope of structuralism further, and he said that literature is always in the form of a dialogue, and the dialogue may be hidden dialogue. Sometimes you make a statement, but in a statement there is some kind of disagreement with itself. You start using qualifiers sometimes, and with the qualifiers, if that is so, then straight away says why say if, and the moment you raise this question yourself, why the word if is used here, then a kind of dialogue starts happening in the mind of the reader. Or there are two people who are talking with each other in a novel, they are discussing, and of course they are not agreeing because they have different perceptions, different points of view. Therefore, what he says is that language structures and literature are by definition dialogic. They always stand in relation with each other at the level of dialogue. It's a two-way process. Two people are talking and they are discussing something, and they are discussing from different points of view, and that's how the soul of literature is dialogue, and that's why he used the term dialogic, and he is known for this particular interpretation. He also analyzed Bakhtin from this angle. He also analyzed some of the writers of the medieval period, like Rabelais, a comic writer in France, that is being discussed from this angle. And Bakhtin has said, that Rabelais was using laughter in order to unnerve people. So when people start laughing, then others wonder as to why they are laughing, and laughter becomes a kind of becomes a kind of question for a large number of people, and people start thinking about it. So he also brought in other concepts, and all these concepts related to the structures which were supposed to be understood in the light of the techniques that were used by these writers. So viewers, I have introduced to you two very important Russian formalists. One is Shklovsky and the other is Bakhtin, and they tell us about the working of structuralism in the structuralism, which is theory in the writing of fiction, in the writing of poetry, etc. I'll give a few more examples from other people who are using structuralist methods. Now let me also tell you in passing, viewers, that when I talk about structuralism, the word may be used differently, or the word may not be used, but other words may be used elsewhere in the Western world. For instance, around the time that structuralism emerges in Europe, the literary circle particularly starts applying these principles to literary works and call them new criticism. And new criticism occurs around the same time as structuralism. In the 1920s, There are people who start, using words as denoters and indicators of meaning, etc. And the interrelationship of words and that, are giving a clue to what the writer says. So this way, new criticism is very close to structuralism in this sense, that both of them are talking about the work of art having a world of its own inside itself at the first level that we discussed. And for this purpose, I introduce to you, viewers, another thinker who is a new critic, an American, and who also contributed a great deal to the analysis of method of analysis in literature. So his name is Clent Brooks, and he has written this book called The Language of Paradox. And in The Language of Paradox, the book contains a detailed explanation of the working of the paradox in various texts. So what are we supposed to do when we read a text? We are supposed to find out a paradox and try to then understand and work out the meaning of the paradox by thinking about it. So look for the paradox and see how the paradox conveys a meaning in a slightly twisted sense. Now let me explain. Paradox is a very strange kind of construction, linguistic construction. Apparently things don't agree, that they go in two different directions, but then they are kept together in the sentence. And when they are kept together, then it's a kind of a witty statement that one is making. And very soon people will start wondering as to why this kind of a description is given in the book. But then it's a paradoxical thing which appears to be opposites, but then actually these two opposites agree and convey some sense to us. So Clent Brooks in this book has talked about, has explained the meaning of paradox, and we can see a paradox at work in the quotation that I am going to read out to you now. And he says that nobody can accuse generally Wordsworth of using paradoxes. Wordsworth is a very simple writer. Wordsworth uses simple language. He talks about simple people, but then he says that even Wordsworth uses paradoxes in his writing. And these are the 3 lines quoted by Clent Brooks, and let's have a look at these 3 lines. It's a beauteous evening, calm and free. The holy time is quiet as a nun, breathless with adoration. So just see, beauteous evening is fine. It's a beautiful landscape, and you really enjoy looking at the evening scene. It's a beauteous evening, calm and free. Very soon he's talking about something else. Beauty doesn't belong to calmness and freedom. But why is he bringing the calmness and freedom as associates of beauty? So very soon we start thinking about the differences that occur between different words at the level of use. And then thirdly he says the holy time is quiet as a nun. Now see the simile. Now holy time is nothing. Holy time has something to do with nun, but holy time has nothing to do with the beauteous evening. So a new vista is opened, a new window is opened in the poem, where holy time has been brought in, and then the nun comes in, breathless with adoration. And it's a holy person, and she is thinking of adoration, she is thinking of worshipping, she is thinking of praying, etc. So what is Wordsworth meaning by this? And Clent Brooks wonders, and he gives an excellent explanation of this, that the beauty is enhanced by calmness and freedom, and then other people are brought in, the holy time is brought in. Maybe the holy time is slightly surprising here, but then people can become calm and free when they are in the atmosphere of holiness, but then they also get into an excitement of a different kind, and they start praying. So all of us know that Wordsworth was a lover of nature, but he didn't believe in religion the way other people do. But then he is using words from different areas of life. He is putting the words together, and these words don't agree with one another in the general sense, and yet a meaning is conveyed. And the meaning is conveyed because we start going into the nature of these words. By comparing and contrasting, we try to fit them together in some kind of a pattern, and because the pattern is new, therefore it will give rise to a new interpretation in the poem. So this is what, there are different structures, which are working here. The structure of nature, the structure of the religion, the structure of a human being, the structure of praying and all these structures, if you put them together in the form of a paradox, then it becomes a poem, it becomes a beautiful poem, and then we start getting a different kind of knowledge from this. The other romantic poet whom Glenn Brooks has quoted to explain paradox is Coleridge, and he says, "He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small." Now just see the paradox. Praying and loving, these are two different things. They are sometimes opposite things. Praying and loving, you love a human being and you pray to God. But well, why can't one pray? Why can't one love God? And you reverse the meaning. And why can't you pray to the lover? So both ways, you are using words from different domains, and these words, start then affording different interpretations and meanings of things. So in Romanticism, which is supposed to be, expression of simple feelings and emotions, you have these hidden, paradoxes, and if you are aware of these paradoxes, then you start understanding poems in a different manner. So now I require you to respond to this understanding of the romantic poetry that I have presented.
And as you said, sir, they help to understand, say the paradox helps to understand the poem in a better manner, or perhaps bring out the ideas that we may not have explored. It probably probes us to think deeper and explore the ideas in a better fashion. Perhaps if we are we cannot be very inactive, we must be active in order to read such a poem where a paradox may occur, in order to explore the greater meaning.
This is something very important that you have said, that the reader is made an active participant in the production of a meaning, and the reader is working very hard. The reader is grappling with the nature of words. The reader is trying to understand how these two words, which go in different directions, actually can be placed together and read. So yes, one should actively read a text as actively as the reader wrote it. So this is the purpose maybe of structuralism, to make people aware of these elements and their presence in literature. Then with the Romantics, Glenn Brooks puts Alexander Pope, a neoclassical poet. Now the first thing that I would say about this poem is that the title of the poem is an essay, the essay on man. It's supposed to be something like a prose piece, and it has nothing to do with poetry as such, but then this is a poem that Pope wrote and in the 18th century, and see how he is using the paradox. Let's see. In doubt his mind or body to prefer. It poses a question to us. Mind and doubt go together, but what about the body? But what is the doubt about the body? In doubt his mind or body to prefer. So mind or body doesn't make sense. It has to be his mind and his reason. But then born but to die, and reasoning but to err. Are we born to die, or are we born to live? So see the paradox. So born but to die, and then reasoning but to err. If you reason, then you are supposed to avoid the mistakes. But here you are reasoning to err, to make mistakes. Alike in ignorance, his reason such. Whether it's reason or ignorance, in both the cases, the same thing. Whether he thinks too little or too much, but never thinks enough, that is. So just see that there are opposites, and these opposites are worked out so well, and they are weighed. On one side is the negative, on the other side is the positive, and there is a kind of pendulum. First you think of negative, and then of the positive, and then you realize that the man is making a very profound sense here, and that is because he is using the paradox. If he were not using the paradox, if he were not merely making a statement, then he would be as boring as a speaker, as boring as a philosopher. So this is what is the use that I make of these different theorists of structuralism. They make us aware about the presence of certain elements in a book, in a text, and these elements can be taken up at the level of the reader by the use of different techniques which structuralism helps us employ. So I finish here. Next time I'll be taking up post-structuralism, and because the structuralism is able to make us aware about newer areas of understanding in life and in literature. But then there are certain problems also with structuralism. One problem would be that structuralism will not help us understand the nature of society around it. Tolstoy's example is different because Tolstoy is making us aware, but then in a way we are going outside. For instance, we are going into the area of property there, and that property, for instance, is something that is not there in the book. It's outside the book. So how to answer those questions? And so techniques also make us sometimes wonder whether structuralism is sufficiently acceptable for the reading of literature and for understanding its essence. So with these I finish, viewers, and I wish that you would face more such questions in the course of going into the areas that I introduced today, and good luck to you.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for the very interesting presentation, and we looked at various examples also, and that would help us understand the area in a better way. So friends, today we looked at some theories of structuralism. We looked at Shklovsky, Bakhtin, and we talked about them in depth, and we also looked at Clement Brooks's idea of paradox, how he finds it in different passages, say from Coleridge or Wordsworth. So friends, as we draw to the end of the lecture, I would like to tell you that in the subsequent lecture that we would have with sir, we will talk about post-structuralism, and that's it for today. Let us thank sir for being here and sparing his valuable time. And so thank you and have a nice day. Keep watching.